Good afternoon. It's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce Vandana Shiva to the Student Faculty Seminar and the Philosophy Forum. Vandana Shiva is the founder and director of the Research Foundation for Science, Technology, and Ecology, and the founder and managing trustee of the Navdanya Trust. She needs no introduction, really. The turnout this afternoon. But as you know, she is one of the great environmentalists, and especially an advocate of indigenous rights for nature and agriculture. And she will deliver the Brennan Guth lecture for environmental philosophy this evening at 8 o'clock in the Denison Theater, and Phil Condon will try to give a full account of her accomplishments. Her topic this evening will be We're All Seeds, Food Security, and Environmental Sustainability. Her topic this afternoon is Living Seed, Living Soil, and Earth Democracy. Please help me welcome Vandana Shiva.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's such a joy to see little babies and those who were babies 60, 70 years ago, and all generations and many backgrounds. Especially on a campus, because I think that's the change we are living through, that campuses are no more just about getting degrees. They're about preparing for life, living life, addressing challenges of community. And over the last 30 years, my personal challenge has become the challenge of protecting living seed and not allowing the invasion of seeds that are destroying the earth, that are destroying our pollinators, that are destroying our farmers, are destroying society, definitely destroying soil. We've done 2 major studies recently on BT cotton fields in the heart of India, which has the highest rates of farm suicides. It's 1 every half hour. It's the area which accounts for most BT cotton planting. And we decided to look at the soils, what's happened to the soils, because BT basically is putting a gene of BT into the plant to express the toxin in every cell of the plant all the time. And soil impact studies were never done. So we looked. 4 years after the planting, 22% of beneficial soil organisms were gone. We're just updating that study. It's still in progress. But the initial results are showing between 50 to 60%. So we're really creating dead soil. Now, for those who've always assumed soil is dead, it's not a problem. And tragically, so much of what is called scientific agriculture was based on the assumption that soil is an inert container for putting nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. It's an empty container. So when you kill the soil organisms, you're not killing anything, because anyway the soil is dead. And now the data is coming out of how dead soils are actually leading to a huge decline in productivity, particularly in areas made very dependent on chemical fertilizers. I think the figures for India is, it used to be for 1 kilo of nitrogen, about 45 kilos of production, and now it's down to 10. But it's huge, and everywhere the graph is going that way. So living seeds and living soils are something we really need to be waking up to. And the life of the seed and the life of the soil comes from the same sources. Comes from life. And I think part of the big illusion that has been created in just this last century is that what makes the world go is finance. And now that you can cook up money instantaneously, $3 trillion every day, magically moving in cyberspace, but suddenly it descends in real land and says, that's a good investment. And this river should be mine, this biodiversity should be mine, this ocean should be mine. Even the ability of the trees to absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen should be traded on Wall Street. It's a big issue. Trade in ecological services. And for those of us who've said no, ecological functions are about ecological integrity, the response is always, oh, but you'll prevent finances from growing, and without growth there won't be development, and without development people will stay poor. I always have to remind them people become poor when their abilities and their resources are stolen. Now, I became an activist 40 years ago, 45 years ago now. And every community that has been made poor because of the model called development, based on measuring growth in terms of money. And now we have the figures. Oxfam put it out in its report, Piketty put it out in his big famous book. 1% is owning as much wealth as 50% of humanity, and on the current trajectory, they'll be owning 99% very soon. Now, I always wonder, how did the Occupy movement get the intuition to talk 1%, 99%? They'd done no research. We just had a collapse of Wall Street in 2008. And I really believe that, at the right moment, you get the right intuition. And they had an intuition about where this economy was taking us. One other dimension of an economy that's treating seeds as dead and killing soils is also killing society, and it's killing democracy. And that's why after we stopped the WTO in Seattle, and we were repeatedly told, oh, this anti-globalization movement knows what they're against, they don't know what they're for. And my response was, A, we know what we are for, that's why we don't like your rules that treats everything as a commodity for sale. And the slogan that we created in Seattle was, our world is not for sale. And because we know what we are for, that we are for the earth, and we are for her integrity, and we are for the rights of the earth, and we are for the rights of every community, every species, every person, to draw sustenance from the beautiful gifts the earth gives us, that the privatization of water, of seed through patenting, of the atmosphere now through all this carbon trading and emissions trading. In my book, Soil Not Oil, I've written about how, in effect, the atmosphere, which is a commons, has been privatized twice over. It was first privatized by treating this common good as a sink for the polluters of the fossil fuel industry. And then, after having caused the pollution, having caused the climate instability, they managed to get agreements done that now the polluters will get the right to the atmosphere and can trade in their pollution, including trade in with those who are not polluting, so they can keep polluting while they get credits under clean development mechanisms. When I was doing soil not oil, I studied all the CDM projects, as they're called, for India. And it turns out they were the worst sponge iron plants. They were the most polluting HCFC plants. And worse, it allowed a rebirth of large dams which had been stopped in India. You know, the big movement against the Narmada Dam had led to the World Commission on Dams, as a result of which even the World Bank had said, yeah, the damage is more than the benefits, so we won't invest in this. But once hydroelectric projects were clean, of course it became available, and so did nuclear. Nuclear was suddenly clean energy. Because now we were dealing with the carbon reductionism. If it doesn't emit CO2, it can have all the radiation that we've seen in Fukushima, but that's clean. I wrote Earth Democracy really to make sense to myself of how do we stay free in a period where corporate ideas have reduced to freedom only for themselves. And you know, your country is one step advanced in terms of corporate rule being treated as freedom. And you remember the famous case of Citizen United. And so, you know, when corporations come to India, I've just written 2 major pieces day before for a Kerala newspaper, because you might remember in Kerala, a group of women said Coca-Cola has to shut down. We're dealing with water, we are walking 10 miles for water. It became a major case in the High Court. The High Court ruled that the water belonged to the community and Coca-Cola was stealing. The chief minister, equivalent to a governor of the region, ordered the plant to be shut in 2004. They then evolved by 2011 a law that Coca-Cola must pay for the damage to the water, damage to the health, damage to farming. Because not only does Coca-Cola mine 1.5 million liters of water a day, it leaves heavy metals in the little bit of water that remains. And we did studies in about 8 sites where Coca-Cola operates, and the same heavy metals are in their vicinity of their wells, but not in the groundwater of the region. Quite clearly showing it's something to do with their process. Of course, it's all a trade secret, which they don't allow. So the government passed law on liability and said Coca-Cola must pay. Of course, Coca-Cola goes to the federal government and says the state has no power. The regional government has no power. We are a federal structure of democracy. So I was writing a comment for the assembly, because they're going to vote on this bill again. And then I was writing a piece yesterday for, on the fact that Monsanto has been sued by our government for illegitimate royalty collection, which is something I've been saying from the very beginning, that they're collecting super profits through royalty is so unjust. But now it's in the courts of India. And you can just see all over where corporations like Coca-Cola, corporations like Monsanto get together and write a few rules and then impose it on the world. My work on Navdanya began really because of the fact that the new potential to do genetic engineering, which the original scientists had put aside and said, we don't know what the implications are, so we will put a moratorium. And they put a moratorium. This was called the Asilomar Declaration. But by then the tools were out. The old chemical company said, wow, not only can we do genetic engineering, but now using genetic engineering, we can say we've invented life and claim patents. And that's when I decided I was going to spend the rest of my life saving seeds and saving the freedom of the seed and saving the life of diversity in the seed. Now that was WTO, GATT. We've got two new treaties called TPP and TTIP. Yeah, both of them, and it's for me it's like a theater, because the same lobbyists sit on this side of the Atlantic and then go to that side of the Atlantic, and they become Europe there and they become America here, and they do the same across the Pacific, and it's the same 5 companies seeking the same 5 freedoms: to destroy the earth, to destroy the environmental laws that for the last 5 decades have given us some ability to regulate environmental destruction, to take away people's rights, dismantle constitutions, and dismantle democracy. So how many of you have been active in the TTIP, TPP debates? And as you know, the most significant shift that takes it way beyond the World Trade Organization is the corporations are now saying we have a right to sue governments in secret tribunals under what are called interstate dispute settlement mechanisms, if governments, in effect, follow their constitutions. So if water is a public good and Coca-Cola wants a privatization or Nestle wants to privatize it, and the local council says, sorry, it's a public good, they can sue. And not here, because here the laws allow water to be kept as a public good, or seed to not be patented, or agriculture to be about nourishment. So it goes to secret tribunals where the rules are free trade. And how do you then deal with a system which has every intention to destroy democracy? For me, Earth democracy is about completing the cycle between the seed and the soil and society. Right now, it's a destructive cycle. That's destroying the biodiversity, destroying the climate, destroying small farmers everywhere. You know, the pattern of destruction of small family farms is global. And whenever it's said farmers want to leave farming, and I had this interesting interview on some national television, and they said, but farmers want to leave farming. I said, if you were paid 10 rupees a day, you wouldn't be an anchor. You'd want to leave TV. Yeah? So don't make it look like it's intrinsic to a vocation to not be viable. Agriculture is our oldest vocation, and in my view, has to be the vocation of the future. And I can see from many of your faces, you've made that choice. You've made the choice to take care of the earth as the highest expression of your own meaning, your own creativity. So the current system based on corporate domination, which first created the limited liability corporation, and now they really would like us to all become zombies and say corporations are people. Yeah. And this whole debate on corporate personhood. How many of you have kept track of the Vermont GMO labeling debate? Yes, see, many of you. And what were the grounds on which Monsanto was suing the government in Vermont? Corporate personhood. saying a requirement for GMO labeling was taking away the freedom of speech. Now, you have to really stretch all your gray matter, and you still won't reach there. Yeah. Because these are impossible connections. But there are three simultaneous processes that this is unleashing. The first, of course, it's making normal, everyday life impossible for ordinary people. Things that were very easy yesterday are becoming impossible today. Could be a small farmer yesterday, not possible today. You could be a small local business yesterday, not possible today. If you are vulnerable to these global trade rules. So basically, living economies are being killed. With it, living democracies are being killed. And the part of it that is, in my view, the most damaging in the very short run is our ability to live as cultures based on diversities being destroyed. And you can just look at our elections, and you can look at your elections. Because when you have economic democracy, which is based on protection of the earth and rights of people, you have basic fundamental security. And a system of that economic arrangement must necessarily also be based on political democracy, of governance over economic decisions, ecological decisions. And when everyone is participating in creating the common security, then you are at peace with each other. But when your job is taken away and your land is taken away, then the same people who have shaped that insecurity then use that insecurity as capital, as electoral capital, to spread hate. And you can just do the analysis of all the election rhetoric everywhere. So the current dominant model must, by necessity, kill local economies, kill democracy, and create killing cultures. And this can move so very fast. It can mutate very rapidly. If you go to Europe now, just within these 6 months, there's a return of all the fascist tendencies that they had put aside after the war. It's become legitimate. And when I talk of Earth democracy, I'm talking of resurrecting local living economies on the basis of a deeper democracy where we consciously realize that we are part of one Earth family. Because we've gone way past the point where individual liberties of a few human beings will be protected, unless our collective liberties with all species and all beings on the earth are protected. We need that expansion in our hearts and our minds for our own ability to act with more power. And it's something a lot of people don't see, that recognizing the rights of the river makes you a larger human being. It's only in the Cartesian world of fixed boundaries that you having more makes me less. Whereas in a living world, everyone can have more. And that more comes through sharing and caring, the two values that have been banished from the economic equation. I remember a long time ago a debate with the biotech industry, and they actually said, we cannot think of ethics and other irrational considerations. And I said, my life is guided by what you call irrational. But real rationality is based on ethics. Real rationality is based on justice. Real rationality is based on the rights of the other. And while we were walking over, Dr. Drake was talking about how Monsanto is so very fond of me. And all the letters of compliment that are received by every campus I go to. And of course, one of their big things is, you know, they've just defined, they've just said, science now, from now onwards, will be what public relations companies can spin. Yeah. So in Cornell, they actually have an entire school for science communication, not for science, but for science communication. And they pay fellowships for people from around the world on how to give the spin on the world will starve without GMOs, proven safe, miracles everywhere. And it's when there's such a shrinkage in vocabulary. You know, when you put down the vocabulary of the global economy, trade, free trade, growth, stops. You go deeper into what's growth, turns out the quicker you can convert nature and society into cash, more growth you have. And after a point, there's nothing left to turn into cash. So I remember 2 years ago, UK, which had a very low GDP, shot up their GDP by 10 billion pounds. Did they create new work? Did they produce more things? No. They said, you know, if we count prostitution and the drug trade, we'll be able to count a bigger economy. And so they'll have to constantly create new definitions for including all their negative externalities as positive contributions to growth. So the more landslides we'll have in the Himalaya, the more Himalaya is growing. Even though the forests are going, homes are being washed out. We lost 20,000 people in 2013. And I know it's one of the disasters, one of the worst climate disasters of our time, never made it to international news. Never made it to international news because it didn't fit into a spin. Sacred Ganges, a few villagers, yeah, can't put it into some geopolitical equation. So us enlarging our identity has become vital to protecting our humanity. You know, if we look at it, the last 100 years have been of us constantly narrowing our identity to fight for our rights. Yeah? So women had to organize as women for women's rights. Black Lives Matter have had to organize. And all that is necessary too. But not at the cost of realizing we are part of one planet and one humanity. Because in the long term, we'll only be able to leap beyond this period of crisis. And I'm not saying we're not in a deep period of crisis, but to even create the possibility that there is a future. It's that larger context of one planet and one humanity, which is what, for me, is Earth democracy. And Earth democracy is, of course, this larger worldview sense, because you always get your sense of who you are by the worldview you put yourself in. But it's also very concrete. It's very concrete because it is about getting down there and building those local economies, so that all the people who think there's nothing for me anymore realize, no, I can be a farmer. for those who feel desperate in terms of living in a food desert. I mean, can you imagine humanity has managed in the most affluent society to create food deserts? That takes something. But you can say, no, we don't have to be a food desert because the farmers growing food, or we can grow food in the urban areas, and this is exploding. This movement is exploding. Our Prime Minister loves, everyone loves smart cities. I think it's IBM got the idea across so they could get contracts. And I'll tell you a little joke about Johannesburg. So IBM got the contract for making Johannesburg smart. And basically, they put cameras in the traffic lights. And when the evaluation was done, crime hadn't come down because their cameras could only identify an AK-47, that big. They couldn't look for a little knife or a tiny gun in your pocket. So Johannesburg didn't become smart. Our Prime Minister wants to make some cities of India smart. There's even a competition. While I'm here with you, in my hometown in Dehradun, my fellow citizens are organizing to stop a smart city because going to chop down our last remaining tea garden of about 2,000 acres and cut down the garden, the trees, to make a smart city. And they bring in Chinese consultants. And besides, of course, all the damage to the forest and the tea garden, and the fact that it's a watershed, it's a recharge zone, this comes right on the border of our Indian military academy. And we know if any other argument will work, this one will, that you can't tell the Chinese to design a city at the heart of your military academy. So, you can keep saying, no, this is not smart, this is not smart. So we last year launched, on the anniversary of our first freedom movement. I know you won't be taught British history, but the British in their history call our first freedom movement the Sepoy Mutiny. But it was basically the Indians saying no more to the East India Company. And that put an end to the East India Company, which also reminds us that companies can end. So I went back to this place and said, we are in a time for the third independence movement. So we had the first, which ended the East India Company, the second, which ended British rule. And now, of course, we are in global corporate rule. You are in it, we are in it. And I always say thank you to the Monsantos and the Coca-Colas and the Cargills. I said thank you for creating a global unity for common purpose, for all humanity. Otherwise, we used to be Southern, you used to be Northern. You used to be Americans and gringos. And there were others who weren't. And there was always an oppositional relationship. And now we have the opportunity to actually think and live like one humanity, not in uniformity, in all our diversities. So, just like you have a problem, we have a problem. Our farmers can't make a living. In the cities, people are dying of cancer. So we did a survey on the cancers, and we did a survey on the farm crisis. And in Meerut, which is where our first freedom movement started, I worked with the doctors and said, doesn't it make sense for you doctors to start prescribing organic food? And now our team is working to make sure there are the shortest possible connections, short distances, between food that's grown around every city, but it goes 5,000 miles away. And the farmers get no price for it. And everyone else is getting toxic food from 5,000 miles away. And we're calling this being food smart citizens. And it's really taken off. I think about 6 cities people are organizing on their own. It's totally self-organized. So basically then living economy means just get down there, unleash your imagination, and do the right thing for the earth, your community, yourself. And that's the other issue. We were always told if you take care of the environment, oh, there'll be less jobs. We were always told that if you take care of society, you'll have less for you. So to have your self-interest, you've got to grab, be greedy, be competitive. And now we can see so naturally that the more we give to the earth, the more she gives us. The more we give to community, the more we get back in return. And the better life we have. And that's why the transition in April 1st to 10th, I'm organizing, we have a school at the Earth University, the Beach Vidyapith, and 1st to 10th we're doing a course. Earlier we used to do it on Gandhi and globalization. Now we're going to do it on Gandhi, gross national happiness, and the well-being of all, because I work with the Bhutan government to help make a transition to 100% organic Bhutan under the umbrella of saying we won't measure growth as GDP and gross national product. We're going to measure gross national happiness and well-being. And that's what they measure as a nation. That's what the indicators are. Now, out of this comes true democracy. Living democracies. Based on participation, not putting that one vote and, look at the choice you have. Yesterday's phrase was, lesser educated, no. Poorly educated. The poor, I love the poorly educated. Yeah. And the minute we realize democracy is about participating in shaping the lives we live, then you don't have to look at who will be voted into power for you for 4 years, for us for 5 years, and get into total depression because of who they are. And then living cultures. Out of this grows, in my view, the deepest love we are capable of. Love for the earth, love for community, love for our own future, for all the babies in this room. Because the virus of hate is so intense. I mean, we are living through it in India. It's so bad. Look at what's happened to Syria. Look at Iraq, Libya. Just all of that region wiped out. And I've never agreed with Samuel Huntington, who wrote in his book, The Clash of Civilizations, you can't know who you are if you don't know who you hate. And it's so wrong. Because you know who you are because of who you are. You are here in Montana, and you do what you do. And that's what makes you the person you are. Not because some fellow in Syria is doing something. That doesn't make you. But like I said, in a period of deep insecurity, hate and fear becomes capital. And for us to create deep ecological security, to create deep economic security, to create deep security in freedom and democracy and deep cultural security, it is love and care that will be the values that will help us shape a possible future. Thank you. So we have time for questions, Dr. Gray? Yeah? Yes.
Dr. Shiva, one of the brighter lights on our otherwise dismal horizon, to me, has been the apparent success of an experiment which started in a town in Spain called Mondragon, based on the cooperative principle. And this, starting from an old-fashioned food co-op, has apparently morphed into a huge population of members, which is now even going worldwide. And I wonder if you have any experience with this particular experiment or others like it, and to what extent it provides a model for some kind of a living future.
I don't have personal experience with that cooperative, but Navdanya, the movement has started, besides, it started really for saving seeds, but you couldn't, I mean, I knew we couldn't save seeds if we weren't growing the seeds. Because unlike everything else, the more you grow diversity and the more you eat it, the more you'll grow it. Otherwise, it's just a museum which sooner or later shrivels up. So we had to do organic. And then it was the farmers who said, now we've grown all these amazing crops, and you've got to help us market. And we don't want to mix it up with the chemical stuff. So we had to create producer communities and cooperatives. And now there's a whole national network through which Navdanya moves the organic produce from farmers' fields to those who are looking for it. And I think this is the future, because if there's one, the language of free trade was about competition, that you've got to be competitive, you've got to compete with each other. And quite clearly, the language of a democracy has to be cooperation. Science is teaching us how the idea that nature works through competition is so flawed. That there's constant cooperation taking place. And in fact, what was talked about as finding laws of biology from nature, narrow anthropocentric and patriarchal ideas of how things work were imposed on nature to then look at for those patterns. And you know, this is how all assumptions of biology evolved, and all the sexism and all the racism related to it. So cooperation definitely has to be the future. And the cooperative spirit will find its expression in different ways. There can't be just a flat, uniform idea of what a cooperative looks like. You know, in my view, the community-supported agriculture explosion in this country, which has made it possible to have access to good food and for small farmers to have an economic livelihood, it is an arrangement. It's an arrangement that's different in the sense not only producers, but both ends of a chain. And I think the more creative we can be about these cooperatives and cooperative arrangements, the more possibility we have that this giant system that thinks it's the future but is wiping itself out. I've been with investors and risk managers who, you know, I do the work I do because of my ecological passions. And they will tell me, he says, what you're saying is so true. They drove coffee plantations to cut down all the trees. And now, more and more places, coffee can't grow. They drove down the prices of coffee producers so low, there are no coffee producers. And the same goes for cocoa. They're running out of chocolate because they destroyed the base. Because this competitive idea and is a predatory idea, extract the last bit from nature and people without giving back. And the cooperative idea is constantly the law of giving back, the law of return. Yeah.
Dr. Shiva, thank you so much for all of your powerful ideas. And it's clear that what we need is philosophical change, is movement building, you know, a lot of work by a lot of people over a lot of years. But are there also sort of tangible, immediate next steps you'd recommend? Like if everyone were to leave and do one thing, is it calling our members of Congress to put in a specific partnership? Is it buying more local foods? Or what are kinds of immediate ways?
There isn't going to be the one thing. I think that's the beauty of learning from diversity. That so far we thought of biodiversity as diversity of species, full stop. Then we thought we could have uniformity everywhere else. And you know, all these artificial debates, so you can have conserve wilderness, but you can destroy farmland, as if the two are not connected. But we need biodiversity of economies. The problem with the current model is it's a global monoculture of 5 corporations in food becoming 4 right now, and seed. Syngenta's just been bought up by ChemChina. And because it's in their logic to become fewer and fewer, because the idea of competition makes you need to get bigger. At this meeting where I woke up to the GMO issue and the trade issue, they actually said we are too small. We've to become bigger. And the companies that will survive will be the ones that can buy up the other companies. But you know, beyond the process, this doesn't last. Even the cancer cell, you know, it grows and grows and grows limitlessly, and the end of it, it doesn't last. And we need biodiversity of politics, which means the local food economy is as important as trying to drill sense in Congress to not pass the Dark Act, the denial of the right to know for Americans of what are they eating. And I think diversity enriches us in a very, very deep way, in a very big way. Because it is the monoculture of the mind, as I've written in one of my really ancient books, that is at the base of scarcity, true material scarcity for things we need, but also scarcity in the sense of our securities. You know, the one reason I do so much work in India to prevent this monoculturalization, we fought against Walmart's entry, and so far we've kept them at bay in retail. But, you know, usually these companies walk in and want one law changed. But I see what this will mean in terms of the millions of tiny traders who bring the vegetable to your doorstep. And I think we have to get out of this single magic bullet solution. And I always tell my colleagues, including here, including in India, including everywhere else, people who just hang around in Washington, I say, you know, just because there's so much power in Washington, you get a sense of reflected power. But you need to give respect to those who are making the real change on the ground. And it has to be treated equally, not unequally. Yeah.
2 questions. In India, I noticed over the last 5 years, there's been a rapid increase in Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, et cetera. And I wondered if you could speak to that. And the second thing is, with these farmers that are losing their land that they've had for millennia in some instances in their families, is there a way in India to try and help them bail them out and return their farms to them to prevent this sort of loss of itinerant farming and loss of cultural diversity?
So first on Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's, again, when they entered because of globalization, I remember for both, I was involved in actions to shut the first 2 down, and they did shut down. But of course, they don't give up. I mean, India has its McDonald's, but not like China. And even in the McDonald's, they're having to sell Indian food. So, you know, like we have this lovely potato fritter, it's called aloo ki tikya. And all their sauces are Indian chutneys. So, in fact, they haven't really been able to 100% impose the McDonald's diet. They've had to take over the Indian diet. But there is, of course, a very confused middle class. Yeah. And I was just watching on TV the other day, we've had some really bad situation in India around students being charged with sedition and a bunch of lawyers taking law into their own hand and beating up the students inside the courts, very ugly. And so the TV was following up with these lawyers. And there's this lawyer sitting in a McDonald's crunching on a hamburger, you know? Yeah. His face is ugly, the burger looks ugly. And he's talking about how he would kill the students next time. And I said, isn't this perfect, you know? The confused Indian middle class that thinks India is the land of violence, forgets Gandhi, forgets Buddha, and forgets all the wonderful food we have and thinks McDonald's is progress. And it just means our work is more. Because, you know, we do have the best cuisine in the world. And you know, just keep reminding people that it's healthy. And I mean, right now, look at our turmeric, you're popping pills, and coconut oil was so attacked, and now everyone's drinking coconut oil. You know, we've had a whole scientific system called Ayurveda behind our food culture. And that's only now making the connection. In fact, I'm working with an Ayurvedic physician on a book on an indigenous way of eating healthy and living healthy. On your second question, I wouldn't use the word bail out the farmers. I would use the word of giving justice. In fact, this recent article I've just done called Make Monsanto Pay is both a consolidation of all the royalty debates that are taking place, as well as the fact that the Indian seed industry is saying your seeds failed the farmers, you'd better pay. Yeah? So there's about 5 or 6 things that are converging together. And one of the things we've written in there, the land should be given back. Land that was appropriated from the farmers because the debt they got into for the royalty payment. And who got the land? The agents who sold the chemicals and the seeds. Should be given back. I mean, so I really feel what's needed is an issue of land justice. Seed justice, land justice, water justice, earth justice. And again, you know, it won't happen overnight. But when I see, when I used to talk about the issue of royalty with GMOs, people say, no, 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 keep that aside. That's not the issue. GMOs are the issue. I said, but the two go together. And now the royalty debate is the big debate in India. The GMO safety issue is still there, but this is what's, in my view, going to really decide the future of GMOs. Yes. Yeah.
You know, when I hear this stuff, it's pretty depressing and hopeless. How have you kept your sense of humor and hope up through all the years that you've been dealing with these things?
Well, you know, the first thing I do is when hopeless things happen around, I say, where can we cultivate hope? And I just turn around and do it. And I've learned to do things that I didn't know anything about. I knew nothing about agriculture. I've taught myself agriculture. I knew nothing about seed saving. I've taught myself. There wasn't actually anything to learn because there was no book on how do you save seeds in a context of the imposition of uniformity and chemicals. So, you know, I talked to an amazing rice researcher, Dr. Risharia, and you just apply your mind. You find ways. You talk to the farmers. You go village to village. So really for me, just saving seeds, you know, one seed at a time, just go at it, has been probably the most important source of hope. Also because it has had consequences. It's had economic consequences for our farmers, it has had ecological consequences, and it's had health consequences. So we have a report where we measure the nutrition per acre on the basis of the seeds we've saved. 2 Indias could be fed with heirloom seeds. And then we do the true cost accounting And the externalities of chemical agriculture, $1.2 trillion annually in India alone, without the health costs, just environmental and social. And then we went to the farmers and said, okay, there's BT cotton, there's organic cotton. There's hybrid rice, there's our basmati rice. There's hybrid corn, and there's our native millets. How does the cost work out? The incomes of small farmers increase tenfold through having their own seeds, not buying chemicals and doing organic farming, and shaping their own market. I think that's the missing link, because this idea of producers just producing and someone else being in charge of the market, there's just the market. The market is happy today. The financial dailies, have you read them? The market is optimistic today. Today it got fever. We've taken everything human and put it into this anonymous construction and robbed ourselves of our own capacities. So, my work with the farmers is always, you have to shape your own market. You have to be the drivers. And of course, there has to be cooperative arrangements, as you said, and there can be support systems. But anything else will exploit. I'll tell you another little thing. Besides our Prime Minister loving smart cities, he loves startups. And so he announced a month ago that he would give tax-free status for startups. And every day now, I get about 10 letters from some young man who learned how to make an application app or a software program or set up a website. He says, "Dear Vandana ji, I am starting a startup on organic farming. Please supply me." That's what startup is, just instantaneously. Get the whole world to be at your service while the farmers slog and the community slog. So, I of course laugh at the ridiculousness of it all, and you have to. You have to have a sense of how insane it is, while realizing that it's for real for those who push it. But we have to prevent it becoming our reality. Both our reality in terms of how we think and our reality in terms of how we live. And then you combine the two, Like I always say, with one hand I sow a seed, with the other hand I shut the door to Monsanto.
Welcome to Montana. As an organic farmer, we're a very small minority in this state, 1%. And one of the frustrations I have as an organic farmer is that I really appreciate those who support us, and there are many to do, but the vast majority in this country really have a cheap food mentality. And that's what they look for, and that's all they think about. They think that food is a place to save money so that they can go to the ball game and go buy a big boat, a bigger house. And I see this as a big challenge for us, because in America, for sure, the vast majority are thinking this way. And I wondered if you had any suggestions or ideas about education or ways to change this kind of mentality.
Well, this is the reason we wrote this book, Wealth Per Acre. Because first thing, we really have to deconstruct the food system to show that what's called cheap is not cheap. It's been produced at very high cost. Take the costs of the inputs, take the cost of the fossil fuels, take the costs of the subsidy. Pull out the subsidy structure from industrial farming and it will collapse tomorrow. But also the externalities. And that, we counted the social and environmental externalities, but just in the work we've been doing now on the health consequences of chemicals, in India alone, it's 300 billion for cancer treatment, 34 billion for diabetes care, and that's not including the hypertension and all the heart problems. And all of these are externalities related to the diet. So for anyone who thinks, you're getting cheap food, and then you have your fat health bill. And of course, you can't constantly do it at the level of an individual. It has to be societally done. That's the work that needs to be done, to say, this so-called cheap food is costing us this much tax money. After all, those subsidies are our taxes. In Europe, I always tell them, I say, you know, they're creating so much terrible austerity. Half of Southern Europe is unemployed now, the youth, because of these austerity programs. And austerity always means we don't have enough money to run employment programs, to continue to give pensions. Half of European budget goes for industrial agriculture subsidies, half the budget. Can you imagine if you got rid of that, how much money there would be for the real things society needs? And it's our money. So I sometimes say, you know, what we'll need in a few years' time is maybe a tax strike. After we become very clear of where should taxes go. And that means we've got to be strong as democracies to be able to make a difference once we say we won't pay for this, but we will pay for this. You know, we will pay for renewal of the land. You know, at the time of your Depression and Dust Bowl, look at the amazing economic programs that were created for conservation, which generated employment, rejuvenated the land, and rebuilt society. And we need that on a planetary scale now. So, you know, we should all do this for our countries. How much have we destroyed in terms of soil, in terms of water, the dead zones, the pollinators? How much have we destroyed in terms of farmers? How much are we what's the health bill related to food? Yeah.
I feel like we have a similar situation in our forests in terms of the soil organic matter that was presented to farmland back in the Dust Bowl area that you spoke about. We are losing a lot of the soil carbon in our ecosystems through simple timber harvest and other situations. And really, the amount of water that we receive here, we don't have enough to maintain forests. It's only the fossil water that's represented in the soil carbon that allows us to, this ecosystem to maintain. And so we're really right on the edge of this soil carbon dilemma. And I wondered if you could address how soil carbon's an important factor, especially in arid areas like this.
I think they are the most important factor because it's organic matter that really is the most significant water reservoir. An issue that has been totally underestimated because with industrial farming came external inputs, and with it came these giant irrigation systems. I hold my head when I fly into this country and, you know, see these circles and then barren land. And this idea of external water input goes hand in hand with external fertility input. And that has basically left the water with the soil with no water holding capacity at all. And Andre Liu, who's the president of IFORM, the International Organic Farmers Movement, you know, we've been working together on the whole issue of building back soil carbon as the biggest climate solution, but it's also the single biggest water solution. And the figures he has used is for a 0.5% increase in organic matter in the soil, you can increase water storage in soil by 80,000 liters per hectare. And with a 1%, it goes up to 160,000. And that's the difference between desertified soils and fertile soils. There was a hand at the back somewhere. Yeah. Yes.
At the end of the day, when you're looking at all of the politicization of the world, and you have the people who are the 1% virtually destroying the very environment they are the cancer, to destroying their hosts, what ultimately is their end game? Because they're killing themselves and the very people that have to buy their products. If they kill the people that buy their products and the people that buy their products have the money to buy their products, then what is their end game?
Well, their end game is power and control. Profits, of course. But the main thing is there's a separation. And the separation has gone deeper because with the financial domination rising, controlling financial investment is the real driving force. I mean, look at Gates. He left Microsoft and he had 5 billion and now he has 85 or 90 billion. Where did all that grow? Grew in financial speculation and investments. Now, once you get into that game, the consequences of your actions, you don't have any idea what's happening, you know, what you're doing. And I really feel Mr. Gates has such a deep disease of separation. He's got no idea. He knows how to control, he knows how to seek more control with his money, but he doesn't know its implications. The second distancing and separation is coming from the fact that like people will say, oh, so you hate people in Monsanto? I said, not at all. Not at all. I would give them a hug if they came close to me. But my problem is I can't hug Monsanto because it isn't a person. Yeah? But because we've created this corporate personhood, you know, we are able to both, as ordinary people, over-exaggerate the power of a fiction that is a social construct. And if society constructed it, society can change it. Yeah? Yes.
Dr. Shiva, I've heard in India there are seed guardians. Could you describe and tell us a little bit about that program?
Sure. It's my real life. So 87, I started to save seeds, really to make sure seeds weren't all genetically modified and patented, and they didn't disappear, because I'd already seen with the Green Revolution the destruction of biodiversity. Since that time, we've created 120 community seed banks. And we call them community seed banks because we really do believe seed is the ultimate commons. Yeah? And seeds are meant to be shared. So the people who take care of growing out the seeds, because these are all living seed banks. There are places, of course, where, just like when you harvest the grain, there's a place where you must keep the grain. After the harvest of seed, there must be a place where the seed is kept. But then they're all grown out. Now, we have more collections than farmers can use for their everyday production. For example, on our farm in Dehradun, our seed bank, we grow more than 1,000 varieties, more than 1,500 now, because we grow about 780 rice varieties, 120 wheat varieties. Wherever I could find any little diversity, we've saved it. And then when we'd say, oh, but it's low yielding. I said, but when did yield become the measure of what's right for nature? And so we had the super cyclone in Orissa, and these rices that could tolerate the salt were the ones that we could multiply and distribute. And then those farmers took 2 truckloads of salt-tolerant rices. And I've had huge debates with the Gates Foundation. Oh, we're working on salt tolerance. I said, tell me where you got the original seed. We care for women. I said, no, that's not the question. Where did you pirate? Where did you pirate the seed from that you claim you have invented? 2 truckloads farmers gave to the Tamil Nadu farmers who were knocked out with a tsunami. Like we got knocked out with the electricity. I thought this happens only in India. But, you know, the final thing about, You know, I think every good organic farmer must be a seed guardian. Anyone who's an urban organic farmer must be a seed guardian. You can't separate production now from taking care of the origins of life. And what we found in this period, and you know, we offer a course every year where we do very extended seed training, including participatory breeding with one of the world's leading participatory breeders, Salvatore Ceccarelli. We do everything on soil, on food, and food economies. And we are now realizing that even though the origins of Navdanya were just saving seeds and the rights of farmers, that if we're going to have real food, we've got to save seeds, because they were the ones that were evolved for food. Others have been evolved for commodities. For climate resilience, these are the seeds. I mean, we actually map it all out. We've got graphs that show how much better native seeds survive a drought or a flood or whatever else. So whether it's the nutrition issue or it's the climate issue, the two big problems related to food, for both of them, the answer lies in seeds bred over millennia, and they haven't got stuck. That's the issue. I'm talking about how they haven't got stuck tonight. Yeah.
I just read something yesterday about a state in India, Sikkim, S-I-K-K.
Sikkim, yeah.
That they went totally organic in that state.
Yeah.
Were you involved with that at all?
I was very involved in the early days of the organic transition in Sikkim. Yeah. But you know, there are about 5 other states that haven't made the big declaration, but have moved policy: Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Bihar, my state, Uttarakhand. I was in Arunachal, which is also in the northeast, working with both the communities and farmers and the agricultural scientists to write an organic agriculture policy. Because with every passing year, the false claims become that much more obvious, especially as climate limits become worse and as the farmers' crisis gets worse. When organic comes out as, you know.
And one other thing, I think that you just arrived last night, maybe?
I did.
And I wondered if you were aware of our community's efforts to acquire our water delivery system, which includes the water rights that are up in the wilderness here, from corporate, private ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware about that?
No.
And if not, then I'm just hoping for your loving presence.
Yeah, but you know, if we can protect our waters as a commons, our seeds as a commons, our social systems that give us a common life, our education, our health, then we'll be fine. So good luck to you. Yeah.
Along the organic lines, I'm curious, in India, when you talk about organic farming, is there a certification structure? I mean, what are we know what organic farming is, like in the United States, there's a federal legal definition of what that means. Is the same in India? Do you have a federal certifying process, or is it done on the state level, or are people just organically farming and then marketing as such? Is there any validation or certification process for that?
There is a certification process, and I was on the national board. I think I am still on the national board for the organic standards. Sadly, a big debate I've always had with my government is they put all of this in the export agency. And my debate was always, so Indians should eat poison? Is that what you're saying? But we have a national certification system which is harmonized with the USDA organic certification and with the European certification system. So it's part of the whole global thing.
The management board of various types of folks, I assume, with the organic certification agency?
Well, the organic certification agencies are accredited by the national agency. Some of them are international, and some of them are national bodies, and some of them are public bodies. The public bodies are more affordable. The international rip us off. And maybe one more. Is there a hand? Yeah.
And I was wondering what your opinion is about, I always butcher it, the Svalbard.
Svalbard, yeah.
Yeah. Could you just touch on that briefly?
So, you know, they actually named that one the Doomsday Vault. And you can kind of get an idea of what they were thinking. The idea they have is, you know, collect all the seeds, and if you see how the seeds come, they come in truckloads, and they're just dumped. And, you know, my colleagues on the farm, Bija Devi, Sheila, the work they have to do to make sure each seed is kept separately, documented with the right label, how much effort of love it is. Now, the Svalbard Seed Bank basically has this idea that there will be collapse, and miraculously, we'll be able to breed new seed out of this. The reason this is so misplaced is even in the last round of centralized seed saving, you know, in the gene banks, it came out that most of the seeds were not viable anymore, so they were called seed morgues. This one is even worse because, you know, the earlier ones were national, and this is global. And just as the time when your players are shrinking, and in my view will be down to 2, and they know less and less what's really going on in the world, and you're going to leave them with 200,000 varieties and say, breed a new variety? It's an impossible task. So we need decentralization, and we need more and more living seed banks, and we need what Salvatore Ceccarelli calls evolutionary breeding. We know we are living through climate change, and it's only the seed itself which has the intelligence to evolve, to adapt to whatever is the changing climate. Okay.